The message came on a cold December morning in the year 2347. Commander Lisa Porter sat alone in the control room of the research vessel Horizon, watching her screens flicker with strange symbols. She had spent 20 years in space, studying distant stars and searching for signs of life beyond Earth. Now, at 53 years old, she was looking at proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. The symbols repeated themselves in a pattern. Lisa's computer worked to translate them, and slowly, words began to form on her screen. She read them once, then twice, then a third time. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the communication switch. Earth Command, this is Horizon. We have received a transmission from an unknown source. It appears to be a message from an alien civilization. Sending data now. Back on Earth, the news spread quickly through the highest levels of government. President Marcus Cole called an emergency meeting of the Terran Council, the group of leaders who governed all of humanity. They gathered in a large underground room beneath the city of Geneva, their faces serious and worried. What do we know? The president asked. General Kevin Tate, a white-haired man who had served in the military for 40 years, stood and walked to the front of the room. He pressed a button, and the alien message appeared on the wall behind him. They call themselves the Verith Dominion, he said. According to this message, they control 47 star systems. They have been watching us for some time. What do they want? Asked Admiral Catherine Blake, a woman known for her sharp mind and calm voice. Kevin looked at her with tired eyes. They want everything. Our planet, our resources, our people. They are giving us a choice. Surrender now and become part of their empire, or be destroyed. The room fell silent. For 300 years, humanity had wondered if there was other life in the galaxy. They had built telescopes and sent probes into the darkness, hoping to find friends among the stars. Instead, they had found conquerors. President Cole stood slowly. He was a quiet man, not given to dramatic speeches, but when he spoke, people listened. How long do we have? Their fleet is already on the way, Kevin replied. Based on our calculations, they will reach Earth in approximately 6 months. 6 months. It seemed like such a short time to prepare for the end of the world. Far away, at the edge of the solar system, Lisa Porter received new orders. She was to remain in position and monitor all Verith communications. Her young assistant, Lieutenant Danny Marsh, stood beside her as she read the message from Earth. What are they gonna do? Danny asked. He was only 28, with bright eyes that still held hope for the future. Lisa shook her head. I don't know, but I know our people. We don't give up easily. On the Verith flagship, a massive ship called the Endless Judgment, Archon Threx studied reports about the planet called Earth. He was the supreme commander of the Dominion fleet, a position he had held for over 200 years. In all that time, he had never failed to conquer a target. The humans were primitive, his advisors told him. They had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their weapons were weak, their ships were slow, and their population was small. The conquest would be simple. Threx looked at the blue planet on his screen. It was beautiful, in a way, full of water and green land and clouds. It would make a fine addition to the Dominion. Send them our final terms, he ordered. They have 30 days to accept. The terms arrived on Earth like a death sentence. The Verith demanded complete surrender. All human governments would be dissolved. All military forces would be destroyed. Humans would become servants of the Dominion, working in mines and factories for their new masters. President Cole read the demands in silence. Around him, the council members argued and shouted, some calling for immediate surrender, others demanding that they fight. The president waited until the room grew quiet. Then he spoke. 300 years ago, our ancestors looked up at the stars and dreamed of what they might find. They hoped for friends, for knowledge, for a chance to learn that we were not alone. Now we know the truth. The universe is not friendly. It is filled with those who would take what we have built and crush what we have become. He paused, looking at each face in the room. But our ancestors also gave us something else. They gave us courage. They gave us the will to survive. And they gave us time to prepare for this very moment. Admiral Blake stepped forward. Mr. President, are you saying what I think you're saying? Cole nodded. For 200 years, we have been building weapons in secret. Weapons designed to fight an enemy we hoped would never come. It is time to use them. The council voted that night. The decision was unanimous. Earth would not surrender. Earth would fight. The next morning, a single transmission was sent from Earth to the Varith fleet. Lisa Porter received a copy aboard the Horizon and read it aloud to Danny. People of the Varith Dominion, this is the Terran Council, speaking on behalf of all humanity. We have received your demands. We reject them completely. Earth does not surrender. We do not kneel. If you come to our world with hostile intent, you will find us ready. We will defend our home with every weapon we possess and every life we can give. This is not a threat. This is a promise. And this is your only warning. Danny stared at the words on the screen. Do you think they'll listen? Lisa thought about the Varith ships, thousands of them, carrying enough power to destroy entire planets. She thought about Earth, small and blue and alone in the darkness. No, she said quietly. They won't listen. They think we're weak. They think we're afraid. Are we? Lisa smiled, a small and dangerous smile. We're human. We're always afraid. But we fight anyway. That's what makes us different. Aboard the Endless Judgment, Archon Threx received Earth's response. He read it once, then laughed. His advisors laughed with him. The idea that a single planet could stand against the Dominion was amusing. It was like watching an insect threaten a giant. Continue on course, Threx ordered. We will crush them and make an example for the rest of the galaxy. The warning had been sent. It had been ignored, and now the war would begin. The weeks that followed were the strangest in human history. Earth went silent. No transmissions left the solar system. No ships traveled beyond the outer planets. To anyone watching from outside, it looked like humanity had simply given up hope and was waiting to die. The Varith scouts reported this silence to Archon Threx, and he smiled with satisfaction. The humans had finally understood their situation. They knew they could not win, so they had stopped trying. Their surrender would come soon enough. But the scouts were wrong. Earth had not given up. Earth was preparing. Captain Greg Santa stood on the surface of the moon, looking up at the stars through the thick glass of his helmet. He was a short, strong man with rough hands from years of building and fixing machines. Behind him, hundreds of workers moved in the low gravity, carrying equipment and installing systems that had been hidden in underground vaults for generations. How much longer? Asked Lieutenant Amy Price through the radio. She was young, only 30 years old, with short brown hair and eyes that never seemed to rest. She spent most of her time running calculations on her computer, checking and rechecking the numbers that would decide humanity's fate. 3 more weeks, Greg replied. Maybe 2 if we push hard. We need to push hard. They're coming. Greg knew she was right. Every day, the Varith fleet moved closer. Every day, the time remaining grew shorter. But he also knew that rushing could lead to mistakes, and mistakes in this situation would mean death for everyone on Earth. He turned back to the construction site. The workers were installing the last of the kinetic accelerators, weapons that could fire metal projectiles at incredible speeds. These weren't normal bullets. They were chunks of tungsten the size of cars, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. At those velocities, they could punch through any armor ever made. "The math works," Amy had told him when they first reviewed the plans. "If we hit them with enough of these, we can break their fleet." "If," Greg had replied. "That's a big word. It's the only word that matters now." On Earth, similar preparations were happening everywhere. In the mountains of Colorado, engineers worked day and night to activate defense platforms that had been sleeping for 100 years. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Catherine Blake commanded the Terran Strategic Command, coordinating the efforts of millions of people across the planet. Catherine was 62 years old, with gray hair and a face lined by decades of worry. She had spent her entire career preparing for a war she hoped would never happen. Now that it was here, she felt something unexpected: relief. The waiting was finally over. "Status report," she said to her staff. A young officer named Danny Marsh, the same Danny who had served with Lisa Porter, stepped forward. He had been transferred to Earth Command a month ago, and he still felt out of place among the senior officers. "All orbital platforms are online," he reported. "Ground-based defenses are at 90%. The fleet is assembled and ready." Catherine nodded. "And the special weapons?" Danny hesitated. The special weapons were classified at the highest level. Even he didn't know exactly what they were, only that they existed and that they were humanity's last hope. "Ready and waiting, Admiral." "Good. Send word to all stations. We go dark in 12 hours. Complete communication blackout until the enemy enters the kill zone." The kill zone. It was a simple name for a complicated plan. For months, human scientists had studied everything they knew about the Verith, their ships, their weapons, their tactics. They had found weaknesses, small cracks in the enemy's armor that could be exploited. The kill zone was designed to exploit every single one of those weaknesses at once thought far from Earth. Lisa Porter watched the Verith fleet from her position near Jupiter. The horizon was hidden in the shadow of one of Jupiter's moons, its systems running on minimal power to avoid detection. Through her telescope, she could see the enemy ships, thousands of them, spread across millions of miles of space. "They're beautiful," Danny's replacement, a young woman named Sarah Kim, said quietly. "In a terrible way." Lisa understood what she meant. The Verith ships were elegant, with smooth curves and glowing engines. They looked like something from a dream. But they carried death inside them, enough weapons to burn Earth to ash. "Don't let their beauty fool you," Lisa said. "They're predators. They've conquered dozens of species before us. They expect us to roll over and die like the others. Will we?" Lisa thought about her home, a small town in Montana where she had grown up watching the stars. She thought about her parents, long dead now, and her sister, who still lived in that same small town with her children. She thought about everything humanity had built over thousands of years: the cities, the art, the music, the love. "No," she said firmly. "We won't." Aboard the Endless Judgment, Archon Threx grew impatient. The journey was taking too long, and the silence from Earth was beginning to bother him. Not because he feared a trap, the idea was laughable, but because he wanted the conquest to begin. He wanted to stand on the surface of that blue planet and declare it property of the Dominion. How much longer? He asked his navigator. 2 weeks, Archon. We will reach their primary defense perimeter in 2 weeks. Good. Prepare the landing forces. I want to begin occupation immediately after the orbital bombardment. His advisors bowed and hurried to obey. None of them questioned his orders. None of them doubted the outcome. The Verith had never lost a war. They had crushed every species that stood against them. The humans would be no different. But deep in the Dominion's archives, there was an old saying that Threx had forgotten. It came from a species they had conquered long ago. a species that had fought harder than expected before finally falling. "Beware the quiet enemy," the saying went, "for silence often hides the sharpest teeth." Earth was quiet now, silent as a grave. But beneath that silence, teeth were being sharpened. Weapons were being loaded. Soldiers were saying goodbye to their families and preparing to give their lives for their world. The Vareth thought they were coming to claim a helpless planet. They were wrong. They were walking into a trap, and when it closed around them, they would finally understand the truth about humanity. They would understand that humans did not surrender. They did not kneel. They did not go quietly into the darkness. They fought. They raged. They bit and clawed and screamed until their last breath. And sometimes, against all odds, they won. The silence continued. The fleet drew closer, and Earth waited, patient and ready, for the moment to strike. The Vareth fleet crossed the orbit of Mars on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. 3,000 warships moved through the darkness of space, their engines glowing like angry stars. Archon Threx stood on the bridge of the Endless Judgment, watching the blue dot of Earth grow larger on his view screen. "Begin scanning for enemy vessels," he ordered. "I want to know exactly what we're facing." His officers worked quickly, their instruments sweeping across millions of miles of space. The results came back the same as before. Nothing. No ships, no weapons platforms, no orbital defenses. Earth appeared completely unprotected. "Archon," one of his advisors said carefully, "does this not seem strange to you? They sent us that defiant message, yet they have no defenses." Threx waved his hand dismissively. They were bluffing. Primitive species often make loud noises before they are conquered. "It means nothing." The fleet continued forward. They passed the asteroid belt without incident. They approached the orbit of Jupiter without seeing a single human ship. Threx began to relax. The conquest would be even easier than expected. Then the first light appeared. It was small at first, just a tiny point of brightness near one of Jupiter's moons. Then another light appeared, and another, and another. Within seconds, thousands of lights were blazing across the solar system, like someone had switched on 1,000,000 lamps at once. "What is that?" Threx demanded. Before anyone could answer, the first weapon struck. The kinetic round hit a Vareth destroyer on the outer edge of the fleet. It was traveling at nearly 100,000 miles per second, and when it struck the ship's hull, the energy released was equal to a small nuclear bomb. The destroyer didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, torn apart at the atomic level. Then more rounds came, dozens of them, then hundreds. The Vareth fleet, so perfectly arranged for the journey through space, became a chaos of fire and death. On the moon, Captain Greg Santos watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. Each dot represented a weapon, and each flash represented an enemy ship dying. He had spent months preparing for this moment, and now it was finally happening. "Fire rate is optimal," Amy Price reported from beside him. "Enemy fleet is taking heavy losses." "Keep firing," Greg ordered. "Don't let them regroup." Across the solar system, human ships emerged from their hiding places. They had been waiting for weeks, hidden behind asteroids and moons, running on minimal power to avoid detection. Now they burst into action, small and fast, attacking the Vareth fleet from every direction. Captain Linda Shaw led a squadron of 12 fighters against a Vareth carrier. The carrier was huge, nearly a mile long, bristling with weapons. But Linda had studied its design for years, and she knew exactly where to strike. "Target the engine section," she called to her pilots. "Right where the exhaust meets the hull. That's the weak point." The squadron dove toward the carrier, dodging enemy fire. 3 of her pilots were killed in the first pass, their ships torn apart by Vareth weapons. But the others pressed on, firing their missiles into the carrier's vulnerable spot. The carrier's engine exploded first. Then the explosion spread to the fuel tanks, then to the ammunition storage. Within 30 seconds, the entire ship was a ball of fire, taking 2,000 Verith soldiers with it. "Target destroyed," Linda reported, her voice shaking. Moving to secondary target. Aboard the Endless Judgment, Archon Threx could not believe what he was seeing. His fleet was being torn apart by a species that should have been helpless. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were dying by the hundreds. How is this possible? He roared. Where did these weapons come from? No one could answer him. The humans had hidden their preparations too well. For 200 years, they had been building weapons in secret, designing them specifically to counter Verith technology. Every weakness had been studied. Every flaw had been exploited. "Order a counterattack," Threx commanded. "Target their weapon platforms." His ships tried to fight back, but it was too late. The humans had seized the initiative, and they were not letting go. Every time the Verith formed a defensive line, human ships would appear behind them and break it apart. Every time they targeted a weapon platform, another platform would destroy them from a different angle. Admiral Catherine Blake watched the battle from her command center beneath the Pacific Ocean. Her screen showed the entire solar system, with every ship and weapon marked in glowing colors. Blue for human forces. Red for Verith. There was a lot less red than there had been an hour ago. "Admiral," Danny Marsh said, "the enemy is retreating. Their rear guard is attempting to break off." Catherine nodded. "Don't let them escape. Every ship that gets away is a ship that can come back later." The human fleet pressed the attack. Pilots who had trained their entire lives for this moment gave everything they had. Some died, their ships torn apart by enemy fire. Others survived, adding more kills to their record with each passing minute. Young Derek Cole, flying his third combat mission, found himself facing a Verith battleship alone. His squadron had been destroyed, and he had no support. But he also had a clear shot at the battleship's bridge. "This is for Earth," he whispered, and fired his last missile. The missile struck true, punching through the battleship's shields and detonating inside the command center. The ship went dark, drifting dead in space. Derek let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. "Splash 1 battleship," he reported, requesting permission to return to base. "Permission granted," came the reply. "Good work, pilot." The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Verith invasion fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its original size. More than 2,000 ships had been destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of Verith soldiers were dead. Archon Threx survived. His flagship was damaged but functional, and he ordered the remaining ships to retreat. For the first time in his 200-year career, he had been defeated. As the Endless Judgment limped away from Earth, Threx looked back at the blue planet on his screen. He had underestimated these humans. He had thought them weak, primitive, easily conquered. He had been wrong. On Earth, the news of victory spread quickly. People poured into the streets, crying and laughing and hugging each other. They had been told for months that the end was coming, that they should prepare to die. Instead, they had lived. Their defenders had won, but President Marcus Cole knew that this was only the beginning. The Verith would not accept this defeat. They would return, eventually, with more ships and more weapons. "We need to prepare," he told his council. "This victory has bought us time. We must use it wisely." The warning had been ignored. The invasion had been defeated. But the war was not over. It was just beginning. The news of the defeat spread through the Verith dominion like a sickness. For 4,000 years, their empire had known only victory. They had conquered species after species, expanding their territory across 47 star systems. No one had ever stopped them. Until now, on the Verith homeworld, a planet called Verith Prime, The ruling council met in emergency session. They had received Archon Threx's report, and they could not believe what they were reading. 2/3 of their invasion fleet destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers dead. All because they had underestimated a single primitive species. "This is impossible," said one council member, an old Verith named Keleth, who had lost his brother in the battle. "How could humans defeat us?" "They prepared," another council member replied. While we were laughing at their defiant message, they were building weapons. Weapons designed to kill us. Then we build more ships. We send another fleet, larger than the first. And if they defeat that fleet too, how many ships can we afford to lose? The argument continued for hours. Some wanted immediate revenge, a massive attack that would wipe humanity from existence. Others counseled caution, suggesting that perhaps Earth should be left alone. In the end, they reached no decision at all. Back on Earth, President Marcus Cole understood that military victory alone would not end this conflict. The Verith needed to accept that humans were not prey to be hunted. They needed to accept peace. He called Commander Lisa Porter back from the outer system and gave her a new mission. She would travel to the edge of Verith space, carrying humanity's terms for ending the war. "This is a diplomatic mission," Cole told her. "But make no mistake, you will be negotiating from a position of strength. They attacked us, and we destroyed their fleet. They need to understand that we can do it again." Lisa nodded. She was tired from months of watching and waiting, but she understood the importance of this mission. War was terrible, but endless war was worse. If there was a chance for peace, she had to try. Her ship, a small vessel called the Messenger, carried no weapons. It didn't need them. The weapons were already deployed throughout the solar system, ready to fire at any threat. The Verith knew this. They would not dare attack a diplomatic ship. The journey to Verith space took 3 weeks. Lisa spent most of that time preparing for the negotiations, studying everything humanity knew about Verith culture and psychology. She learned that they respected strength above all else. They viewed weakness as an invitation to attack. If she showed any hesitation, any doubt, they would see it as proof that humanity was still vulnerable. The meeting took place on a neutral space station at the edge of Dominion territory. Lisa walked into the conference room alone, her back straight and her eyes steady. Across the table sat Sub-Archon Keleth, the council member who had lost his brother. Keleth's eyes were filled with hatred. Lisa could see it clearly, burning behind his calm expression. But she could also see something else, something that gave her hope. Fear. "You killed my brother," Keleth said. His voice was translated by a machine, but the emotion came through clearly. "Your brother came to enslave my people," Lisa replied. "We defended ourselves. That is not murder. That is war. The Dominion has never forgotten an insult. We will have our revenge." Lisa leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you something about humans, Sub-Archon. We have been fighting wars against each other for thousands of years. We have developed weapons you cannot imagine. We have survived disasters that would have destroyed other species. And we have never, ever surrendered to an outside threat." She let those words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "Your fleet attacked us. We destroyed it. You can send another fleet, and we will destroy that one too. You can keep sending fleets until you have no ships left. Or you can choose peace." Keleth was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice quieter than before. "What do you want?" "Recognition. A formal treaty that acknowledges humanity as a sovereign power, equal to the Dominion. A promise that no Verith ship will enter our space without permission. And an apology. An apology? For assuming that we would surrender without a fight. For treating us as prey instead of partners." The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. There were arguments, threats, moments when Lisa thought the whole thing would collapse. But slowly, painfully, progress was made. On Earth, people watched the news with anxious eyes. They had won the battle, but they did not know if they had won the peace. In coffee shops and living rooms, in military bases and government offices, humanity held its breath and waited. Admiral Catherine Blake spent those weeks preparing for the worst. If negotiations failed, the Veroth might attack again. She made sure every weapon was ready. Every soldier was prepared. She would not let her guard down until the treaty was signed. General Kevin Tate worked with her, coordinating the defense forces. He was exhausted, running on little sleep and too much coffee, but he refused to rest. "I'll sleep when this is over," he told anyone who asked. Not before. Captain Greg Santos remained on the moon, maintaining the weapon systems that had saved Earth. Lieutenant Amy Price stayed by his side, still running calculations, still preparing for scenarios that she hoped would never happen. "Do you think it will work?" she asked him one night, looking up at the stars. "The negotiations? I don't know," Greg admitted. "But I know that we showed them what we can do. They'll think twice before attacking us again." On the space station, the final session of negotiations began. Lisa sat across from Kelleth, two diplomats trying to end a war that neither of them had wanted. "The Council has agreed to your terms," Kelleth said slowly. "We will recognize humanity as a sovereign power. We will not enter your space without permission. And we will." He paused, as if the words were painful to say. "We will apologize for our assumptions." Lisa felt relief wash through her, but she kept her expression calm. "Thank you, Sabarkam. I hope this is the beginning of a new relationship between our peoples." "Do not mistake this for friendship," Kelleth warned. "The Dominion remembers its enemies." "So do we," Lisa replied. "But we also know how to make peace. I hope you can learn to do the same." The treaty was signed the next day. News of the agreement spread across both human and Veroth space. For the first time in 4,000 years, the Dominion had recognized another species as equal. When Lisa returned to Earth, she was greeted by crowds of cheering people. They saw her as a hero, a symbol of humanity's victory. But Lisa felt no triumph. She had seen the hatred in Kelleth's eyes. She knew that peace was fragile, that it could break at any moment. Still, it was peace. For now, that was enough. President Cole met her at the landing site. "You did well," he said simply. "I did what was necessary," Lisa replied. "The rest is up to time." Across the galaxy, in the halls of Veroth Prime, a new age was beginning. The Dominion had learned a painful lesson about the cost of underestimating an enemy. They would not forget it. And on Earth, humanity looked up at the stars with new eyes. They were no longer alone, no longer ignorant of the dangers that waited in the darkness. But they had proven something important to themselves and to the universe. They had proven that they could survive. 10 years had passed since the war. 10 years since the Veroth fleet had crossed into human space and found death waiting for them. 10 years since Lisa Porter had signed the treaty that brought peace to two civilizations. The galaxy had changed in those years. News of Earth's victory had spread far beyond the Dominion, reaching species that had lived in fear of the Veroth for centuries. Some sent messages of congratulation. Others sent requests for alliance. A few even asked for help, hoping that humanity might protect them from their own enemies. Earth had become something new, a symbol, a beacon of hope for those who had been told they were too weak to fight back. Admiral Catherine Blake had retired from military service 5 years ago. She now lived in a small house overlooking the Pacific Ocean, far from the underground command center where she had coordinated humanity's defense. Her days were quiet, filled with gardening and reading and watching the sunset. But she still thought about the war. Every night, before she went to sleep, She remembered the faces of those who had died. The pilots, the soldiers, the thousands of people who had given their lives so that humanity could survive. She carried their memory like a weight on her shoulders, a weight she would never set down. One evening, a visitor arrived at her door. It was Commander Danny Marsh, now 40 years old with gray beginning to touch his temples. He had risen through the ranks since the war, becoming one of the most respected officers in the fleet. "Admiral," he said, using her old title out of habit, "the council is asking for you. They want you to speak at the anniversary ceremony." Catherine shook her head. "I've given enough speeches. The young ones should speak now. They're the ones who will face whatever comes next." Danny sat beside her on the porch, looking out at the waves. The ocean was calm tonight, reflecting the light of the setting sun. It was hard to believe that 10 years ago, the fate of this entire planet had hung in the balance. "Do you think they'll come back?" Danny asked. "The Verith?" Catherine considered the question. She had thought about it many times over the years, turning it over in her mind like a stone. "Maybe," she said at last. "Someday." But they remember what happened. They remember the warning they ignored. I don't think they're eager to repeat their mistake. Far across the galaxy, on Verith Prime, a new Archon had risen to power. His name was Torvath, and he was different from his predecessors. He had studied the human victory, not to plan revenge, but to understand. What had made this small species so dangerous? What had given them the strength to defeat an empire? He found the answer in their history. Humans had faced extinction many times, through disease, through war, through natural disasters. Each time, they had fought back. Each time, they had survived. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy, or the most advanced. But they refused to give up. They refused to accept defeat. Torvath had ordered the final transmission from Earth preserved in the Hall of Records, where all Verith could see it. The human words had been translated into the Verith language and carved into stone. Earth does not surrender. We do not kneel. If you come with hostile intent, you will find us ready. Beneath the inscription, Torvath had added his own words. They were small. They were young. And they were not afraid. It served as a warning to future generations. Some species could not be conquered. Some enemies were better left alone. On Earth, the anniversary ceremony took place on a warm summer evening. Thousands of people gathered in a great plaza, looking up at a stage where their leader stood. President Cole's grandson, a young man named Peter Cole, addressed the crowd. 10 years ago, he said, we faced the greatest threat in human history. An empire that had conquered dozens of worlds came to claim ours. They expected us to surrender. They expected us to kneel. They were wrong. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Our defenders fought with everything they had. Many of them died, giving their lives so that the rest of us could live. We honor their sacrifice tonight. We remember their courage. And we promise that their deaths were not in vain. Peter paused, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The universe is vast and dangerous. There are enemies out there that we have not yet met, challenges that we cannot yet imagine. But we have proven something important to ourselves and to anyone who might threaten us. We are not a species that surrenders. We are not a species that kneels. We are not a species that gives up. He raised his hand toward the stars. We are human, and we will never stop fighting for our freedom. The crowd erupted in cheers. Somewhere in the back, an old woman with gray hair and steady eyes watched in silence. Lisa Porter had retired years ago, but she still came to these ceremonies. She felt she owed it to those who had served with her, to those who had died while she survived. She thought about the future stretching ahead, the challenges not yet faced, the enemies not yet encountered. Humanity had proven itself once. They would do so again, as many times as necessary. In her small house by the ocean, Catherine Blake watched the ceremony on her view screen. She did not cry, though she felt tears burning behind her eyes. She had learned long ago that commanders did not cry, even when they wanted to. But tonight, alone in her home, she allowed herself a moment of emotion. Pride for what humanity had accomplished. Grief for those who had been lost. Hope for what the future might bring. The transmission that Earth had sent 10 years ago still echoed across the galaxy. Every species with the technology to intercept it had heard humanity's words, had felt the steel behind them. This is your only warning. The Vareth had ignored that warning. They had learned the cost of their arrogance. And now, 10 years later, they served as an example to anyone else who might make the same mistake. Danny Marsh stood on Catherine's porch, watching the stars with her. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. They had done their duty, and now the future belonged to others. But if those others ever faced the same threat, they would have something to guide them. A memory, a lesson, a truth that had been written in fire and blood across the solar system. Humanity was not a species to be conquered. Humanity was not a prey to be hunted. Humanity was something new in this old galaxy. A beacon, a symbol, a promise. They had sent their warning. They had made it clear. And anyone who ignored that warning would face the consequences. The stars shone down on Earth, cold and distant and eternal. And somewhere among them, humanity's name was spoken with respect and with fear. This was their legacy. This was their gift to future generations. They had faced the darkness, and they had won. The end.